Hi, everyone, and welcome to Living Well with Dr. John, Adjustment Through the Lifespan. Today's topic is quality of life. Two quick notes before we begin. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Reeve Foundation YouTube channel. Additionally, to turn on closed captioning, please click the CC button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Before we begin, I'm going to share two webinar disclaimers. The first is, this is for educational purposes only. For psychological services, please contact your state psychological association for referral. The second disclaimer is, the questions, comments, and opinions expressed during this webinar may not express the views and beliefs of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Now for some background on Dr. John. Dr. John Chang is a clinical psychologist and is board certified in rehabilitation psychology. He's a professor of psychology at East Stroudsburg University, as well as a consulting psychologist. Dr. Chang also has a private practice through Doctors on Demand. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. John. Hi, Dr. John.
Hey, Kaylee, thank you again for the intro. And thank you for helping me coordinate all this. I can't do this without Kaylee, and she's my digital specialist, right? Am I getting that right?
Digital coordinator.
Digital coordinator, wrong title. Okay, digital coordinator. I'll get it. I'll figure it out once after a couple of years, right? But digital coordinator. And as always, I have to thank the foundation and Angela for allowing me to bring this podcast to you once a month. Your feedback and questions and suggestions are incredibly interesting and allows me to know which direction to go. I'm excited today. I get to have one of my friends, Allan, today, Dr. Allan McLeod, and I'll briefly bring you into the podcast today because I think he has a lot of information that will help us understand our lives as individuals with spinal cord injury and maybe some tips on how to make, improve our quality of life. So, as if you ever seen any of my previous podcasts, I always like to start the podcast with some personal experiences and our perception ideas. Maybe some of it may be relevant, some may be just part of life. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about that happened the last few weeks since the last podcast. So I took my mom to the doctor, and in the era of COVID, it was really nice to not have to actually go in and see the doctors face to face. But this time, the doctor wanted to see. Actually, no, this time it was for a test. It was a procedure, so we had to go in. So my wife brings her in, and we're at the at the procedure, and she brings my mom in. She's going towards 80, and so as they come out, I hear the nurse says to my wife, "Oh, your dad is waiting for you." And I listened. I was like, "Did she just call me? Say that I was her dad?" And so briefly, I was just like, "Whoa, man! Is it that I'm that old, or is this the wheelchair just makes me look old?" So I am blessed that she is a lot younger than I am, but in only 10 years. I wouldn't say a lot younger, but I guess enough with being in a wheelchair, it probably makes it even worse to think that I am older. So you have to take it a grain of salt. You have to laugh at it a little bit. But so I thought that was something that was funny. This happened this week. Another thing just happened last night. I woke up at like 3 a.m. thinking about this research publication I was trying to publish in the last few weeks and trying to figure out. And some of you may know, my research is on compassion. It's been translated a few different languages, but I woke up, 3 a.m, couldn't go back to sleep, and the reason I brought this up is I wanted to give a shout out to a friend of mine, Bill Weiss. Now, Bill is the president of Limited Mobility. I don't get any money for this, but I'll tell you, he has helped me have the ability to control my hospital bed. Now, that may not sound much, but the fact that I can control my hospital bed through my Amazon Alexa, and I could raise my head and lower my leg, trust me, has made a huge difference in my quality of sleep. And so those of you out there with spinal cord injury, you got to use technology to your advantage if you can, because the fact that I can raise my head, lower my legs, it just makes it so much more comfortable at 3 a.m. when I couldn't go back to sleep. So shout out to Bill out there. And you know what? If you need his service, and he's a nonprofit organization, he's nicest guy out there, and he's willing to help you do anything. Hell, he's helped me figure out how to open my door just by voice. So it's, again, he's just a neat guy, and feel free to, I would think, give him a call. We put down his contact on in the chat room if necessary. So that, my last thing I wanted to share with you is this, and I'm going to ask a little survey out there in a chat room, a yes or no. So I was watching my mom eat her lunch just a few minutes ago, and she eats the dessert first all the time. So I said to her, I said, look, how come you eat your dessert before your main meal? And she looks at me and she says, because dessert tastes better. There you go. See, it took me 55 years to figure that one out, that sometimes you have to eat your dessert first. So let me know in your chat is do you eat your dessert first? I am curious if anyone out there that eat your diverse, yes, no, I eat my dessert first, and give me a yes or no in that chat. I'm curious. Okay. So again, let's get to our topic of the day. So I have a friend named Dr. Allan McLeod. Now, I've known Allan for, God, man, this has to be 20 some years at least. I was a college student. I think he might have been either a resident or a medical student at that time. He had his injury in '86. So it was the same time as mine. He was a fourth-year medical student at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, which rendered him a C6 complete tetraplegia. Now, I'm a C5-4, he's a C6, so you know how that goes. You know, we're always envious of the ones that has an extra 1 inch down on a certain, vertebrae there. So at least, so he graduated from the school. He spent his rehab at the Hershey Medical Center, Elizabethtown Rehabilitation, and he finished his degree in 1988. He spent many years as a full-time clinical practice instructor at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. He was associate professor in family medicine. Now, you think, okay, he's got his medical degree, he's settled, his family, and you would think he's busy enough. No. Well, you know what? While I'm not doing anything, I'll just go get a law degree. Okay, so not only does Dr. McLeod has a medical degree, he goes and gets a law degree behind it. Okay, but after he passed his law degree and got his Pennsylvania bar license, well, you know what? Maybe I might be doing these sequences in a different order, but somewhere around there, he decided to go get his MBA. So he has a business degree, which MBAs are not easy to come by, and he gets a law degree. And in the meantime, he has his medical degree as well. So obviously, he's been a huge motivation for me. He's inspirational in a lot of ways. He's in a wheelchair. He has a lot of different views, both personally and professionally. I'm hoping to tap in on that today. I'm hoping to get you to understand him as much as I understand him, because he has a lot to offer. And again, he inspires me to be better. So I don't know if I think last time I might have told you in my podcast, I went back to school as well. So so while I'm doing my work as being a professor, I decided, hey, let's go back to get another degree while I'm at it, which is weird because after 25 years of being a teacher, now I'm a student as well, which now I understand why my students ask some of those dumb questions that I ask. Okay, so what I'll do, we're going to have Allan, Dr. McLeod, come on. And there he is. Allan,
Well,
thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Hopefully, as I said before, I don't disappoint.
I don't think so. I don't think so. First thing, when Allan came on a few minutes ago before we did the podcast, he had to pick on the fact that I was in a cold weather state. And Allan, where are you at now?
Tucson, Arizona.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful Tucson. And
yes.
And you mentioned something right before we talked that there's an optimal range for us SCIs. And, I never realized that because I like it hot. I like it about 78, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I was told way back, this is 35 plus years ago when I was in rehab, that for a quadriplegic, at least, the optimal temperature range is basically 74 to 80 degrees. They said, if you get in an environment much lower than 74 for a while, you cool down. If you're in an environment much warmer than 80, then you heat up. We're almost like lizards when you think about it, right? We're almost poikilothermic. It doesn't take long for me if I go out here when it's 100 degrees to get really hot. And certainly when I'm going up to Canada, it doesn't take long for me to be in, 27 degrees to get really cold really quick. So.
Yeah. Now you're a product of the rehab, and I did not know you went to the Elizabeth. So you didn't go to McGee in the Philadelphia area.
No. I was injured in central Pennsylvania. So they took me first to Carlisle Hospital, for anybody out there who may know that, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, then to Hershey. I was there for maybe a week before I got transferred to Elizabethtown, which was the rehab associated with Hershey.
Right.
And really, it was one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, I loved Elizabethtown rehab.
Great. Yeah, because at McGee, there's this area that, well, we all sat in because it was always hot. And and at Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia, there was the bridge where the two buildings connect. And a lot of us used to sit there between the bridge. And those who go to Denver, Colorado, which I've been there as well, there's also a few more bridges there between buildings that we used to sit in, being a lizard. So Lizard Lane, they used to call it.
Yeah.
So you are a C6 complete, correct?
Correct.
So was there a time, when I think of my friends that are C5, C6, or actually more C6, C7, they're like in between electric chair and manual chair sometimes. Was there a point, or were you always in an electric chair, or there was a point where you were a manual chair pusher?
I was a manual chair pusher. Medical school, when I did my internship, when I did my residency, when I did my fellowship in the hospital. So I would leave my manual wheelchair in the PT apartment at the hospital. And then to get to the hospital, I lived about, 2 blocks away. So I just ride my power chair down the street till I got to the hospital, then transfer into my manual chair. and basically spend the next 8, 10, 12 hours pushing around the hospital, seeing patients, doing other things that, medical students and residents and interns do. So, yeah. And then when I went out of town, I was always worried that my power chair was going to get damaged. You hear enough about airlines.
Yes.
So I took my manual chair anytime I went out of town to a conference, places like that, just to be on the safe side. I'm not sure when I transitioned completely to power chair. Oh, maybe 10 years after my injury, because I was going to my office every day and it was up this hill. And so the only place to park sometimes was down the hill. I had to push my way up there, and I was like, yeah, no, I'd be sore. And I said, no. So I just went full time to a power chair. Not that I don't ever use a manual chair anymore, but I can't sit in a manual chair like I can in a power chair, with the tilt and the leg elevations and stuff like that. So yeah, I seldom get in my manual chair anymore. It's just too uncomfortable.
A lot of, at least lower level quads seem to over time develop the overuse syndrome. Their shoulders are blown after 20 some years, and it's at least the ones that I know, that just continues to push. But there is something psychological about going from a manual to an electric chair for some reason. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but for me, I always wanted to use a manual, but I could never do it. And so there was like an ego shattering that I couldn't push myself for some reason.
Well, luckily I never had that problem. I just manual power to me. And yes, about the shoulder problems quads get, that was one of the things that we were told in rehab. So that was kind of an excuse I could use to not use my manual chair too much, right? To stay with the power. But I had no problem riding around in my power chair. If anybody looked down on me like, oh, you should be in a manual chair, well, that's your opinion, but I love the freedom my power chair gives me. Uphill, downhill, all day, without feeling exhausted at the end of the day. So yeah, I never had a problem using my power chair.
Yeah.
Others might have had a problem with me using one, but that's their problem, not mine.
In looking over your review of the things you've gained, the knowledge you've gained over time based on your life experience as well as your professional experience from all your different degrees, what was the most difficult aspect of post spinal cord injury adjustment for you?
Well, I was always a very athletic person. High school, college, in high school, I played just about every varsity sport. College, I wasn't quite good enough to go to the varsity level in college, but so I played intramural sports and basically played just about every intramural sport there was. And same when I went to medical school. So I was very active. Then when I got injured, and I came to the realization, and it didn't take very long, that this is how I was going to be. And I had to shift my focus. Okay, I'm not going to go out play golf, on the weekends. I don't have enough strength to shoot a basketball in a hoop. So I'm not going to even play wheelchair basketball. I'm not going to be, a lot of things I knew I couldn't do. So my focus shifted to education. So it's like, all right, let's go back to medical school. Let's finish that, do my internship, do my residency, do a fellowship, and then after that, MBA and then law school. That kept me busy. Instead of like going home and watching TV, bemoaning the fact that I couldn't be out playing baseball or whatever. Now, I go out and go to school. And, so education was, it was kind of my motivator for, continuing to move forward.
It kept you busy, sounded
yes.
like, and kept you distracted.
Exactly.
And that's what I've been telling last year about adjusting the spinal cord injuries, that you have to stay busy. You got to do things all the time, because a mind that's just idle creates havoc in your head. And that's the reason why I went back to school, because I got so tired of watching Netflix.
Exactly.
Just only so many movies I wanted to watch, and I started rewatching the same movies, and I was like, although you know what, it's surprising when you watch the same movie twice, you pick up things you didn't see the first time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just only so much you can do with that, right, Alan?
Oh, absolutely. As I said, yeah, to sit around, I think if you just sit around and do nothing, you think about more of the past and what you had and what you've lost. You tend to kind of dwell on those things. Whereas if you're like, okay, here's my goal, I'm going to go to get an MBA, right? And so then I had something to look forward to, something to strive for, something to keep my time occupied. The same way with law school. You know, better than sitting at home watching TV. You know, every evening after work, you know, I'd head off to school.
Yeah. You know, Kaylee, can you ask a question? Does anyone ever does everyone out there binge on Netflix? I mean, when I binge on a series, it's like I literally could be watching a thing all day and like 10 hours straight. And then at the end of that, I'm like, I feel so guilty that I wasted the whole day. So we should ask the listeners, do everyone binge on movies? So okay, let's see. So there it is. Do you binge on Netflix or streaming services? Yes or no? My listener, I'm curious. Am I the only one out there that does that? So in the meantime,
Wait, I can't vote. What's that all about? The answer is no. I don't tend to binge on a series. So once I start a series, maybe I'll watch a couple episodes every night until it's over with. But I don't sit around for 8 or 10 hours to watch Netflix. It's just, that's way too boring.
Okay, we get 66% yes. So Netflix will enjoy that answer. Okay. It sounded like though, Alan, that you mentioned that you, after your injury, you said, I'm going to focus back on education. Did your injury have a factor in why you did a certain type of career versus another career? Because I love being a professor, not because of only being a teacher, but it allowed me flexibility. Yeah.
Right.
How about you?
Yeah, it certainly affected my choices. But before I was injured, by that time, I had already decided I was going to be a family practitioner. Now, my dad was a surgeon. I thought about being a surgeon. He also delivered babies. I thought about being an OB, and then you go through that in medical school. You do it again in your internship, and you're like, yeah, no, I can't live this lifestyle. So, okay, I'm going to be a family doctor. Now, I want to do a med peds program and basically become a super family physician. That's how I saw myself, and then probably going out in private practice. And that's what changed after I was injured, and like, okay, I have to refocus this. There's no way I'm getting into a meds peds program. There's just too many procedures you have to do in both of those specialties. So family medicine, not many procedures I had to do. And not that I couldn't do any, I could do some, but the rest I could let at least other people handle that kind of stuff. So that's changed my focus. Okay, family medicine. Now, where am I going to work? Well, I'm not going to do private practice, and I guess maybe I kind of chickened out there. A lot of friends over the years asked me, why don't you start a private practice? And I didn't really want to take on that risk. So the medical school offered me a position seeing patients. I took that. It was basically a 8 to 4 job. Of course, you had to get in before 8, but and usually leave around 5. But it was an 8 to 4 job, steady paycheck, benefits. So I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to work for the medical school, and it worked out well.
Yeah. For me, I wanted to make sure whatever job I had, I could do it well. And I didn't have to worry about my disability being judged. That, is he as good if he wasn't disabled? But I stated before, I have problems with autonomic dysreflexia all the time. And at any time, I would have to take a break or do something. So being a professor, being a psychologist, gave me that type of freedom. What would you, if you had to go back and review career and job, what would you say to our listeners about, what should they think about when it comes to, I mean, you had so many different accolades. What would you do?
Well,
Would you do anything differently? What would you suggest to them?
sure. Well, would I do anything? Well, I wouldn't break my neck, I think is what I would do differently.
That would be a nice
taking
one.
taking that off the table. All right, and going forward after that, I would just tell people to find something they want to do. And I've told this to a lot of friends who are disabled in SCI, that there's so many things you can do out there, right? You can go, apart from certain jobs like a Walmart greeter, if you want a further education, go to law school. There's a lot of quadriplegic lawyers out there and paraplegic lawyers, right? So look for professions like that. Go to business school. You're become an accountant. You don't have to do much except, push a button on your calculator or on your computer and fill up the spreadsheet and let it do the work. So yeah, do things that you can do, and then go for that as a career. And that's what I usually tell people. It's much better, than to do something that you can't really do and be frustrated at it.
Yeah. And we're going to answer some questions later on that has relations to some of these issues when I go through the registration questions. Now, listeners out there, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, please feel free to send them in the question and answers, and Kaylee will look through it and let us know at the end if there's any questions specific to us that we can address. So one of the things I always ask, when it comes to having a spinal cord injury and how to succeed spinal cord injury, is to have good social support and having a good mentor. Now, when I heard about you and through the grapevine, and I think I was the one that reached out to you. I needed someone to guide me. I needed someone to inspire me to say, look, I can get through this, because look, he's doing it. We've got hurt at the same time. He's a little bit ahead of me when it comes to being in a profession, but if he's doing it, I can do it. So I needed a mentor. Did you have anybody in front of you that said, look, life is going to be okay if you just keep working hard? Or did you, what happened to you, when it comes to that process?
No, I really did have a mentor but it was just really self-motivation. I mean, the closest I would say to a mentor, somebody I looked up to and wanted to emulate, was a Dr. Stoss at McGee, who was the head of rehab there. And he was once I went back to medical school, then I started hooking up with McGee, and he was my physician. And he was everything I thought a physician should be. The way he dressed, the way he talked, just the way he comported himself around the hospital and patient's room. I said, okay, that's the doctor I want to be. I want to be like this man. So if there was anybody I would say that was a mentor, it was him.
Okay. How has your injury impact the people around you? Do you notice anything you had to adjust to that made sense to you now or before? What things did you do differently to make it work? Because in some of our questions, that is asked is always, there's people don't understand us. People don't have a hard time relating sometimes. So what did you learn from all these years? Now, was that 35 years post injury for both of us? So.
Yes. Oh, well, I guess what I've learned is let things kind of just, like what they say, water off a duck's back. When people ask me things or say things to me, I don't, there's a term ableism, ableist, and I'm not a big fan of it because I think most of it is not them looking down on us, it's them not knowing how to interact with us, what to ask, what to say, because they have no idea about spinal cord injuries and what it affects and what it doesn't affect. So when there's been a few times that I knew for sure, okay, this was aimed at me because I was in a chair and they wanted to put me down. But 99% of the interactions where people say something or ask something, I say, okay, this is an educational moment. They're asking this or they're saying this because they don't know. So it's my job at this point to educate them as to why I am the way I am, and what I do, why I do the way things I do. So that's always been my outlook is, make it an educational moment. Don't make it a moment where you feel hurt and then you want to lash out and hurt the person back.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing is that one, don't sweat the small stuff.
Exactly.
There's so much things we can focus on. So what you're saying, don't sweat the small stuff. And number two, I'm hearing is that every interaction can be an opportunity to teach someone.
Absolutely. And I guess that's why I'm a physician, because I guess it's what I was told in medical school, and I've never looked it up. Physician comes from the Greek or something for teacher. So maybe that's why I became a physician. But that's certainly how my outlook on life when things come up is this a teachable moment or not? And if it is, then I go ahead and give a lesson.
Great. It reminds me of the one time where I remember, the person parked his car at the curb cut, and my wife was just irate, and she wanted to go out and yell at this individual, and I said, no, just let me go talk to him, and I just nicely asked the individual to move the car, and that I needed to, to use the curb cut, and she came back to me and said, "Why didn't you say something? He was a jerk for being insensitive," and my thoughts were at that time was, I wanted to give this guy an opportunity to see that we're not irrational people in wheelchairs, that we can be incredibly respectful and formal, and in hopes that gives them maybe a lesson, understanding that we, to be more sensitive, instead of giving him a reason to park there all the time to be.
Well, yeah, parking is always a big issue, especially with us quads. And the few times, I said, there's been a few times where I knew they wanted to put me down, and it's usually revolved around parking. I remember one time I was going to this pet store to get some fish. I had a pond in my backyard. I was going to pick up some snails and fish, and there was basically one handicap spot there with an access aisle, and somebody was parked there. So I didn't want to park anywhere else and maybe get parked in, as often happens. And at that time, I didn't like to take two parking spaces. I've learned my lesson since then. If you need to take two spots, you take two spots. That's just the way it is. So I waited, and then she finally came out and got in her big SUV and sat there for a while. So I went up politely. I said, "Oh, could you move? So I can use the spot here." I'd stopped my van basically in the middle of the aisle, and got out and took. And she says, "No." And did she look disabled? I don't know, because I saw her coming out of the pet shop, walked to her car, certainly wasn't using a wheelchair. And I said, "Well, this is for disabled." She said, "Well, I have a disability, you just don't see it." It taught me my first lesson about invisible disabilities. I said, "Oh, okay, but did you still move, since you're finished your business?" "No." So I waited for a while. Finally, she left. I pulled into that spot then and went into the store. When I came out, got back, she came back and pulled her SUV right in front of me, so I couldn't pull out of the parking spot. And she just sat there for a little while staring at me. And then she beeped her horn and drove off. And another experience like that, I was going, I think I was getting my Christmas meal at Acme in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Same kind of thing. Parked, went in, did all my grocery shopping, came out. My power chair is loaded with bags, and there's a guy parked in the access aisle. And I said politely, could you just move so I can get in my van? And he said, oh, I'm sorry I offended you. I said, you didn't offend me. I'm just asking if you could just move so I can get in my van. Sure. And then he proceeded to do the exact same thing. He parked in front of me and just sat there. Like, yeah, now what are you going to do, buddy? And then he eventually left and I went home. But those are the kind of experiences, that kind of teach you that not everything is a teachable moment. Sometimes, people are just jerks.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to teach anybody anything at that time other than I wish my fingers would work a little better with that middle finger at that time.
Yeah.
So, Kaylee, can you put out a question out there that says, has everyone had issues with parking ever, dealt with issues? Yes or no on that question? Yeah. I'm curious if seems like all of us have been parked in. I didn't take long to learn to double park because you a lot of the handicap spots are taken. And so you find a double place to park your van and take up two. And so, but the problem is, the next person sometimes just parks you in on an angle as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, oh man, you make an effort to avoid everything and then you still, but so I am curious, does ever have an issue with parking? And that invisible disability is hard because there are legitimate people who have it.
Sure. Exactly.
But how do you know how you can't call it out, So that is a tough one.
Yeah. So speaking about what you were just saying, at work, I had a parking spot. So, in the parking garage, I parked there every day. Was my spot. And so one time I'm coming out because I have to, I don't know, I'm probably going downtown to do some work for an insurance company. And there's this little there's this access aisle, maybe probably 4 feet wide, and then to my van, another couple. So there's a Mini Cooper parked right in there. So I go back in and call security, and they look it up. Oh, yeah, she works here at PCOM. Actually, she was right in my office. She helped us out in clinical education every once in a while to do certain things. It was her. She was so embarrassed. I said,
yeah, not a good time to screw up your boss's parking, possibly, right? But 81% of us people who have issues, it looks like, experienced similar events. So it's definitely something that is a frustrating part of our lives. One of the things that, I'm definitely going to tap into your medical background and again, maybe even your personal background. The three big things for spinal cord injury that I always hear from many of my listeners is, one, accepting the disability, just accepting the paralysis. That's a huge, huge factor. Two would be bow, and three, these are not in any order, but
right.
These are the three top topics: bow management and pain management as well. Can you give me a little bit of how you succeeded in some of these areas, possibly as a physician or as a person with a disability?
Well, let's start with the top one, accepting my paralysis. That really, for me, didn't take long. Here was a fourth-year medical student. It was Sunday, it was hot. We go over to my wife's aunt's place to go swimming. They have an above-ground pool. I'm sitting there all afternoon chatting with them, and then all right, it's 4 p.m., time to go home. I said, well, I'm going to get in the pool. I haven't been in the pool all day. I think I'll go in one time and then we'll leave. So I got up, went down the slide head first. What I didn't realize was how the slide curved And, there's that angled area between the shallow end and the deep end of the pool. And that's usually where spinal cord injuries happen in a diving accident. And that's exactly where I hit, right? And I don't remember hitting, but I do remember floating up to the surface and saying to myself, you just broke your neck. Now, thank God my wife, who's an ER nurse, she sees me floating face down, figured, that's not a joke. So she got me out. And so then I went to Carlisle Hospital in the Hershey Medical Center. And they were talking about, should we do surgery or not? He said, but at that point, some of my function was kind of coming back, my biceps and wrists. And so they said, no, we'll hold off. And then about a month later, it was like, well, this is as good as you're going to get, Allan. And we were basically at that point, like, yeah, I figured. So you just have to accept it and then move on with your life, which is what I tried to do. I think I was fairly successful at it. Bowel programs, that's a tale of two cities. I think like everybody with a spinal cord injury, or almost everybody, you have issues with bowel programs. And mine, at one point would last an hour and a half, 8 hours before I would take my Senecot. Then 8 hours later, have a meal and get on my shower chair, start my bowel program. Usually with a Fleet's mini enema, and it would last like an hour and a half, sometimes even more. What a waste of time. Now, I sat in there and I read my books. So that's how I spent a couple of hours, until it was done. Then in 2012, no, it was earlier than that. This was probably about 2006, yes. Bowel program, a lot of bleeding problems. Went to see a colorectal surgeon. He goes, oh yeah, you have a prolapsed rectum, basically. So we'll do surgery on that. Fix that up for you, okay. What I didn't realize is they took out like 18 inches of my lower colon, my sigmoid colon, which is basically where the feces, let's be nice, dries out and becomes solid. And so for the next 5 or 6 months, if I ate something, it would came out very shortly afterwards. But over time, my body adjusted to it. And now for a bowel program, it's, as I said, it's a tale of two cities. It takes me 20 minutes start to finish, right? You just go in, dig stim, basically, or manually disimpact. And that takes 5 minutes, take my shower. I'm done getting out of my clothes and in my pajamas, because I usually always do my program at night, in 20 minutes. So.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I just remembered every time I travel, the bowel had to be part of the equation.
Oh, yeah.
Because not only, because if I remember, you transferred for many years on your own, but I always thought of, okay, how do I bring the lift? How do I get in and out? Right. Who am I coming with? Who's traveling with me? I still today, I hate traveling, although I like going to different places. I hate lugging my entire, equipments, everything.
Right.
So, and I know that is a big factor for us to always,
yes,
it's a priority.
Yeah. And that's why I'm always, if I'm going anywhere, it takes planning, right? So where I'm going to this place, where are there hotels that say they're accessible? Then do they have a roll-in shower? You have to plan, and then you have to keep checking with them, because people think a roll-in shower is one thing, but sometimes it's just a walk-in shower, and there's no way for me to get in. So you always have to make sure and follow up, like, yes, so I'm coming tomorrow. The room's available, right? Yes. And a few times I've gotten burned, because you'd show up and like, oh, sorry, we gave that room away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just called you yesterday to tell, and that's what the thing that frustrates me the most about that is you prepay, okay? You got to prepay for that first day. So I've done that. And yet they still give the room away. It's not like they're going to lose money. If I decide not to show up, they've already got the money. They've charged my credit card. They're not giving you a refund. You didn't show up. So they have the money. They tell you they have the room, and yet they just give it away. And again, I think this is another example of the people at the front desk are just not knowledgeable. Okay. Somebody says, I want a handicap room. Well, any handicap room should be fine, right? Not realizing that persons like ourselves, quads especially, we can't just use any bathroom or, use any room. We need one kind of more tailored to our needs.
Yeah, especially with space, having sometimes with those double rooms with double two beds, there's very limited. Or
Right.
Again, like you said, big difference between a row and shower and a walking shower, which has
Exactly.
a 3 or 4 inch lip there that you're not going to get your chair over no matter what. And so, we are the question about pain management, that's just a big factor for me, having a significant autonomic dysreflexia all the time. There's a lot of people on opioids, and there's a lot of people that smoke marijuana to try to compensate. Do you have any suggestions as a physician, what would be a good pain management tools for us?
Oh, well, I guess I've been lucky that way. I've never had a real bad problem with pain. Yeah, I mean, if I sit here and think about it, my right foot feels like it's in an ice box. My left foot feels like it's in an oven. My butt feels like I'm sitting on a bed of nails. My lower back is killing me. But if I don't think about it, if I'm just talking to you and stop thinking about it, my pain is to the level that it basically fades away. So I've never really had a pain management program. Sure, when I've had some surgeries and stuff, they've put me on opioids and stuff, though I really don't think I need them because I really don't feel any pain. And then as soon as I'm out, I get off of those things. I guess the best thing I would say, if you have access to it, is somebody who knows about spinal cord injuries, perhaps at a place like McGee, and that deals with pain management. Otherwise, if that's not available to you, just find a pain management specialist of some kind, and hopefully they'll educate themselves, on the best way to deal with pain in a person with a spinal cord injury. And unfortunately, there's too many people, they just have us lowly family physicians.
Yeah. Like you said, I go to a lot of hospitals when I have my procedure, and I bring my autonomic dysreflexia card and paperwork, and it tells you exactly what are the symptoms, how to treat it. When it goes over this much, give this medication. If it goes over 200, give them nitrobit, so it literally lists out what a physician should do especially the anesthesiologist who has to deal with my blood pressure and my pain and et cetera, we're forced to educate them. So I guess the ball is in our court a lot of times, I guess, right?
Yes, I think it's incumbent upon us to educate people. So autonomic dysreflexia, luckily, I don't have a lot of problem with that.
Right.
But my problem when I go to the hospital, what I worry about is, I've been coded 3 times. I have this funny little heart that, when something's not quite right, it just decides to stop. It happened in rehab. It happened at Jefferson on the operating table. And what was the 3rd time? Oh, I can't remember the 3rd time, but there was 3. Oh, that was even before I was injured. I had a spontaneous pneumothorax that evolved into that's a tension pneumothorax. And for people out there, that's basically your lungs, which are usually sacs filled with air, spring a leak. And the air comes out of your lungs into your chest. And sometimes it goes both ways, and that's not a big problem. When it can only go one way, if it becomes a one-way valve, then your lungs get smaller and smaller. The air in your chest expands, the point where it squeezes your heart. And so that was really the first time, they coded me. So yeah, that's the one thing I always make sure I talk about to the docs. Like when I had my surgery for my tendon transfer, I was at Jefferson, I coded, and that was, they figured because the lidocaine, they put what's called a beer block. They put tourniquets on, fill your arm up with lidocaine. And then at some point, like 2 hours into the surgery, they have to let blood go back to your hand or your arm, or you're not going to lose it. So they turn down the tourniquets, and that's when I coded. So I just tell them, lidocaine could be a problem with me. Don't give it to me unless it's necessary.
Right.
Otherwise, I also have problems. So you may want to look for, well, probably. I don't suffer from tachycardia that much. I suffer from bradycardia, where my heart rate is 36 beats a minute. So I tell them, always make sure you have some atropine or some epinephrine around, because my heart sometimes really gets slow.
Yes,
it needs a boost.
For those of you as not as educated as he is, so he suffers from slow heart rate versus a tachycardia, which is anything above 100. So whereas I have the problem of having my heart tend to run in the 95 sometimes and 100, and I have to take things to slow it down. So I'm gonna, we have about 10 more minutes in our podcast, so I want to make sure I address some of these questions. And and Allan, you may be able to help us with some of these answers, and some of it we've already gone over. Colleen writes in about what struggles. This whole podcast today was about quality of life, and specifically when it comes to interviewing you. And she writes that she struggles with ability to travel and bowel program bogs are down, and you and I know it's really hard to get around that issue, and between hemorrhoids and bleeding and longevity and constipation, it's just a part of the difficulty of travel.
Yes. I mean, do I have any great advice for her? Not really, except, as I've already said, you just got to plan everything as meticulously as possible. So you have, when you get where you're going, everything you need, whether it's a room, whether it's your shower chair, whether it's a lift, to try to make it like if you were home. But it's not good. It's not always going to be that way. It just can't be.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Jeff from Florida asks, he has constant pain, constant bowel issues, and he has good days along with bad days. Difficult to plan anything, difficult sleeping as well. Again, I think you mentioned it. There's good with the bad, like you said. But if you stay distracted, now I would say the sleeping at facet. I would say he probably would want to assess: is it a medical issue versus a psychological issue? Is it a behavioral change versus something that he can physically have an issue that's causing him to be having insomnia?
Yeah, when it comes to insomnia, I can relate, because that's a problem I developed about 4 years ago. Some of it was because of pain, because of my syrinx. I have hyperesthesia on my left side of my face. So if I lay on a pillow, it just aches, right? And then my shoulder on my right side aches if I lay on it. So some of it's pain. But I think some of it comes down to anxiety, because I was very independent for this syrinx, right? As you said, I could transfer in and out of anything just about. So now I have to adjust the fact that, maybe I can still transfer from my chair to my bed. I can't transfer from my bed back to my chair anymore. I just can't do it. And that was easy. I just sit up, flip, jump over, not anymore. And that causes anxiety for me. I'm like, okay, what if I'm stuck here in bed for whatever reason?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? If there's a fire, if there's a burglary, if my wife's out shopping and I have a problem and I can't get out of my chair, can't get out of my bed. So some of it's anxiety, some of it's pain. And how
Yeah.
do I deal with it? Oh, I talk to my doctor and take certain sleeping aids. Some work, some don't. And so I have a good night would be 6 hours of sleep in bed. Most nights it's probably 2, maybe 4. The rest of the time I live in my chair.
Yeah.
It's no way to live, but it's just the way it is. I just recline all the way back with my headrest on and sleep that way.
Yeah. Yes. And, it's I hate nights. I hate sleeping. I don't know the listeners out there if you like nights, because when I'm in bed, I'm at least functional, and
Yes.
my brain works at the worst. I mean, it just goes places where I don't like to go when I'm busy during the day. So I hate nights. And unfortunately, research shows that sleeping aids only helps about 30 extra minutes of sleep.
Yes.
So it's nothing significant when it comes to the quality of sleep you get there. But as a psychologist, it is a behavior that can be helped a little bit if you change some patterns and diet and aspects. So, but coming back, here's one question from Chad, and the main struggle in his life, and he puts it right out with one word. He says it's income. I don't have. I'm guessing he's saying, look, I don't have enough money to live a better quality of life. And, you and I are fortunate. We had careers.
Yes.
Would you agree with me that now I've always wanted to make sure I worked either for the federal government or the state, because I knew that I wanted to have good insurance,
Right.
good holidays. I assume that's probably where you're at with this question as well, right?
Well, as I said, that's why I decided to work for the medical school, because it gives you a certain, amount of safety. Because yes, I had insurance, I was getting paid, I had vacation, I had, other days off, personal days, sick days. Just we all have problems, especially as in spinal cord injury. Every once in a while, you just can't make it to the office. So you had sick days off, I had sick leave. So yeah, that's why I chose what I chose. But even before that, as I said, I think the answer to a lot of this, and it's not everybody can do it, but is more education. I was in Pennsylvania, Voc Rehab. They helped equip my van. They bought me a computer. They did a whole bunch of things right off the bat that allowed me to go back to school. So again, I don't know everybody's individual situation, but if you're trying to go back to school, I think you contact the Voc Rehab people in your state and say, this is what I want to do. Try to come up with a plan, and maybe they'll assist you. Because again, with education, you get more opportunities. And with more opportunities, you have a better chance of making more income. I mean, I just didn't work for the medical school. I did a fellowship in quality assurance and utilization review. So for the next 30 years, I did that. I worked for hospitals part-time, insurance companies part-time, just to make extra income. But I did that because I had that educational piece that I put in place.
Right. You gave yourself more opportunities.
Yeah.
And I do that too as well. Being a professor, I have other consulting gigs, just because the opportunity lends itself. Based on research, the nice part about, the only positive part about education is that most spinal cords do have a college degree, compared to general population. We're actually more educated because many of us know that is our path to, like you said, all these things.
Yeah.
So they do push, and many of spinal cord do take advantage of that situation and go to Voc Rehab. A brief story is that I had a student who had an MS and didn't even know anything about Voc Rehab. And when I told her, when she graduated from college, I was like, hey, did you ever think about Voc Rehab and with your MS? And she's like, no. And she ended up going for her master's in social work with Voc Rehab support. So
Yeah.
it's the organization, the money is all there for individuals with people with disabilities?
Yeah, for me, I mean, they paid my last year of tuition at medical school. So I
Wow.
could finish up. Yeah. Like I said, I got a lot of assistance from Voc Rehab.
Okay. Kelly, do we have any questions that I didn't address out of your? Did we get them all today?
We have one question in the chat, and it is, do you drive? What do you drive? Do you roll up a ramp to your vehicle and pull up to the wheel to drive?
Yes, that something I should have said earlier. One of the key things, at least for me, for independence, was being able to drive. As I said, Voc Rehab helped equip my first van for me, so I could get back and forth to work, back and forth to school. Yeah, so I do drive. I drive from my chair. I used to drive from a manual chair. Now I drive from my power chair. And I'm a C6, so I have enough strength to use basically simple mechanical, we call it hand controls. So yes, I do drive. I have two vans right now. I have a big full-size Ford where I use a lift to get in. I have a minivan, a Chrysler, which has a ramp that comes out. So yeah, that's how I enter the vehicle. And then I usually drive. Though anymore, again, because of pain issues when I drive, I tend to leave it anything more than a half an hour to my wife to drive me someplace.
Yeah, I lost my driving privileges, I think around 37. It was that despicable family doctor that, finally he asked me, "Oh, do you have a hard time driving?" Unfortunately, I said yes to him. And he ended up sending it into the state and said, you can't drive anymore. And I really didn't fight it. And so losing my driving privilege was probably the biggest independent psychological factor for me, because I lost everything. I was like, I have to ask now to go.
Exactly.
Which was so frustrating. Wow. This hour went really quick. Usually there's more detail and I can cover it. And I apologize, listeners, that I didn't get to answer some of your questions more, but we had so much information coming from Dr. McLeod here. I wanted to thank you again, Allan, for coming on and sharing your life and your professional and personal experiences with us today.
Well, again, thank you, John, for inviting me. I hope I met people's expectations.
You always have. And thank you for being a great friend to me and a great mentor of mine. So everyone out there, I won't get to see you for Christmas, obviously, but all the other holidays that comes up. So have a great, safe holiday. I will see you some in January. I think the next podcast is January 4th, right after New Year. So after some football and a lot of junk food, and we can come in and talk about it and the guilt of eating all that. So happy holidays and to everyone. And one of the things, did you put out that peer-to-peer? I think when it comes to mentoring, Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation have a peer mentoring process, so feel free to take a look at that. They have some questions on caregiving, and we do have some information on caregivers for caregiving as well. So thank you, Allan. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelly, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Okay.
I know.